Think about this for a moment. You've worked your entire life, saved what you could, bought a home, built what looks like a comfortable nest egg on paper. You've done everything society told you to do. You check your bank statements, maybe glance at your retirement accounts, and you think to yourself, I'm doing okay, I'll be fine. But here's the uncomfortable truth that financial advisors don't always share with you. What looks like security today might actually be the very thing that leaves you vulnerable tomorrow. What if I told you that the retirement plan you've been counting on for decades is actually setting you up for failure? Right now, millions of people over 60 are walking straight into a financial trap that could destroy their golden years. And the worst part is, most don't even realize it until it's too late. Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. Do you know the difference between being worth $1 million and actually having $1 million you can live on? Has this ever happened to you? You look at your total assets, add up the value of your home, your car, your savings, and the number looks impressive. Maybe you've even crossed that magical $1 million threshold in total net worth. You feel a sense of accomplishment, a sense of relief. Finally, you think, I've made it. But have you really? The reality is far more sobering than most people want to admit. Out of every 100 Americans, only 2 or 3 have actually accumulated $1 million in liquid investable retirement assets. Not net worth, not home equity, not the inflated value of possessions. I'm talking about actual money that can sustain you when the paychecks stop coming. Real cash flow that pays your bills, covers your medical expenses, and lets you sleep at night without anxiety, gnawing at your peace of mind. But before we begin diving deeper into this critical issue, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. This information could literally change the trajectory of your retirement. Now let me share something that might shock you. The median retirement savings in the United States right now is just $87,000. Let that sink in for a moment. Half of all households have less than that. If you're sitting there thinking, well, at least I have more than that, stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely change how you view your retirement readiness. The trap that catches most people after 60 isn't lack of assets. It's having the wrong kind of assets, and understanding this distinction could mean the difference between a retirement of dignity and freedom versus one of quiet desperation and difficult compromises. So what exactly is this trap? And more importantly, what should you be doing instead? Let me share something that most people discover far too late in their journey. When you look at workers in their late 50s and early 60s, people who are literally standing at retirement's doorstep, their median savings sits at around $185,000. These aren't people who didn't try. These aren't individuals who spent recklessly their entire lives. Many of them worked hard, raised families, paid mortgages, and did everything they believed was right. Yet after 40 or 50 years of employment, after countless decisions about where to put their money and how to build their future, they still find themselves drastically short of what they actually need. This is where the hidden truth starts to reveal itself, and it's a truth that challenges everything we've been taught about financial security. See, most people have been led to believe that owning a home is the ultimate sign of making it. When your house value goes up, you feel like you're winning. You check those real estate websites, see your property worth has climbed, and there's this sense of accomplishment that washes over you. Your neighbors congratulate you. Your family feels proud. Society tells you that you've achieved the American dream. But here's the revelation that changes everything. That house, no matter how much it's worth on paper, is what financial experts call an illiquid asset. Your wealth is essentially locked inside those walls. It's trapped in the foundation, the roof, the renovations you made over the years. And while it sits there, looking impressive on a balance sheet, it does absolutely nothing for you on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't generate income. It doesn't send you monthly checks. In fact, it does the opposite. It demands money from you constantly for maintenance, property taxes, insurance, and repairs. This is the transformation moment that many people miss until it's too late. You cannot eat your kitchen cabinets. You cannot pay your prescription costs with your beautiful backyard. Medical bills don't accept square footage as payment. When you're sitting across from your doctor discussing treatment options, or when you're at the pharmacy counter, or when you're simply trying to buy groceries, that home equity means nothing in practical terms. You might technically be a millionaire because your house appreciated over the decades, but if you can't access that money without selling the roof over your head or borrowing against it at unfavorable terms, what kind of wealth do you really have? If this kind of straight-talk financial clarity is valuable to you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You'll get content that cuts through the noise and focuses on what actually builds long-term security, not just what sounds good in the moment. The impact of this realization hits people hardest right when they need stability most. They retire with significant home equity, feeling confident, only to discover within months that their living expenses are eating through their actual liquid savings at an alarming rate. Suddenly they're faced with impossible decisions. Do they downsize and uproot their entire life? Do they take out a reverse mortgage and slowly surrender their home to the bank? Do they go back to work, pretending it's because they enjoy staying busy, when really it's because they have no other choice? Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding what you should be doing instead requires us to completely shift our mindset about what retirement wealth actually means. Write in the comments, "I see the difference now," if this is starting to click for you. The fundamental shift in mindset that separates those who retire comfortably from those who struggle comes down to one critical distinction: understanding what liquid capital actually means for your future. A real retirement millionaire isn't someone who owns $1 million house and calls it a day. They're someone who has actual investable capital sitting in accounts that work for them around the clock. This capital produces cash flow, generates dividends, creates income streams that arrive monthly without requiring them to sell anything, borrow anything, or sacrifice anything from their daily life. This is the revelation that transforms everything, yet most people spend their entire working lives completely missing it. They confuse the illiquid wealth trapped in their home with genuine financial freedom. They look at their rising property values and mistake appreciation for income. But these are two fundamentally different things, and confusing them is one of the costliest mistakes you can make on your journey toward retirement security. Here's where the hidden pattern emerges, and it's a pattern I've watched repeat itself across countless lives. Human beings possess an almost supernatural ability to procrastinate the exact thing that would save them. We tell ourselves stories that sound perfectly reasonable in the moment. "I'll start saving seriously next year when I get that raise." Or, "Once the kids finish college, then I'll focus on retirement." Or, my personal favorite, "Things are just too chaotic right now. But once everything settles down at work, I'll really commit to building my nest egg." But here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to face. Things never settle down. Life doesn't suddenly become calm and predictable, offering you the perfect moment to start building wealth. Instead, life becomes progressively more complex. New expenses appear from nowhere. Your responsibilities multiply rather than diminish. Medical costs creep up. Aging parents need help. Unexpected repairs demand attention. The chaos doesn't decrease with time. It evolves, transforms, and often intensifies. Meanwhile, there's this silent force working against you every single day, and it doesn't care about your intentions or your timeline. Inflation moves forward relentlessly, eroding the purchasing power of every dollar you manage to set aside. It doesn't pause while you wait for the perfect moment to start investing. It doesn't take a break because you're dealing with other priorities. While you're procrastinating, while you're telling yourself you'll get serious about this soon, your money is losing value in real terms. This creates a vicious cycle that catches people completely off guard. You save money diligently watching your account. Balance grow, feeling proud of your discipline. But if those savings are sitting in regular accounts earning minimal interest, they're actually losing ground against inflation. You're working harder and harder just to stay in the same place. Without investments that actually grow faster than prices rise, you cannot save your way out of financial insecurity. You need your money working as hard as you do, compounding, growing, building momentum behind the scenes while you focus on living your life. The impact of understanding this distinction earlier versus later in life is absolutely staggering. Every year you delay represents not just lost savings, but lost compound growth that you can never recover. This isn't about perfection. It's about starting the journey, making the decision to shift from passive hoping to active building. Type in the comments, "I'm ready to shift," if you're seeing how these pieces connect together. What most people fundamentally misunderstand about building wealth is that it doesn't happen through dramatic moments or brilliant insights. $1 million doesn't materialize overnight because you made one clever investment or caught one lucky break. It shows up quietly, almost invisibly, after decades of small, unglamorous, rational decisions that nobody applauds in the moment. This is what makes compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. But here's the catch that trips everyone up. It only works its magic if you participate in it long enough. To witness its exponential transformation, think about how a snowball grows as it rolls down a hill. At first, the growth is barely noticeable. You're adding small amounts, watching your account balance creep up slowly, and frankly, it feels underwhelming. There's no immediate gratification, no rush of excitement. But somewhere around year 10, 15, 20, something remarkable begins happening behind the scenes. Your money starts making money, and that money starts making even more money. The growth accelerates in ways that seem almost impossible when you first start out. This is where the hidden truth about wealth building reveals itself in the most unexpected way. The decisions that actually create lasting financial security are boring. They're so mundane, so unremarkable, that most people dismiss them entirely. They're the opposite of exciting, and that's precisely why they work. See, human beings are wired to love excitement. We're attracted to stories of overnight success, dramatic wins, and thrilling gambles that pay off. That's why lottery tickets sell. That's why people pour money into cryptocurrency schemes promising 1,000% returns. That's why overpriced tech stocks with compelling narratives attract billions in investment from people who haven't done any real analysis. But here's what happens in reality. Those exciting decisions, the ones that get your heart racing and make you feel like you're finally taking control of your financial destiny, they're actually destroying your wealth. They're entertainment disguised as investment. Meanwhile, the boring decisions, the ones that make you feel like nothing special is happening, those are quietly building retirement accounts that will actually sustain you for decades. The journey from financial insecurity to genuine freedom isn't paved with thrilling moments. It's built through consistent, repetitive actions that test your patience and challenge your desire for immediate results. And this brings us to perhaps the most uncomfortable revelation of all. The real reason most people never accumulate significant wealth isn't because they don't understand compound interest or because they lack access to good investments. It's because they never learn to delay gratification. And our modern world has become an endless machine designed to prevent them from ever learning this critical skill. Every advertisement you see, every marketing message, every social media post showing someone's upgraded lifestyle, they're all engineered to trigger that immediate desire for consumption. The message is always the same. You deserve this now. You've worked hard. Why wait? Treat yourself. The entire economic system profits when you choose present consumption over future security. Nobody makes money when you decide to invest $500 instead of buying the latest gadget. But when you make that boring choice, when you sacrifice the immediate pleasure for the distant benefit, you're making a decision that your future self will thank you for in ways that are difficult to imagine right now. Put delayed gratification wins in the comments if you're recognizing this pattern in your own life. This pattern plays out in the most predictable way, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Someone gets a raise at work, maybe 5 or 10% more income than before. Immediately, almost reflexively, that raise transforms into something tangible. A newer car with higher payments, a bigger apartment or house with a larger mortgage, a vacation package that stretches the credit card. They justify it with perfectly reasonable-sounding logic. I work hard. I deserve this. I've earned the right to enjoy my success. And on the surface, that makes complete sense. But here's the hidden cost of that decision. You can't reach $1 million in investable assets if every raise becomes a new toy and every bonus becomes instant gratification. If this video gave you a new perspective or clarified something you've been uncertain about, hit that like button. It's a small gesture that helps this message reach others who need to hear it. This isn't wealth building. This is performance art. You're essentially rewarding yourself for surviving another work week by making your future self progressively more vulnerable and financially insecure. Each upgrade, each lifestyle inflation moment locks you into a higher baseline of expenses that becomes harder and harder to reduce later. The car payment that seemed reasonable at the time becomes a chain around your ankle for the next 5 years. The bigger house means larger property taxes, higher utility bills, more maintenance costs. What felt like moving forward was actually moving sideways, or sometimes even backward, on your journey toward genuine financial freedom. And here's something that shifts the entire perspective on what we're even aiming for. When people dream about having $1 million, they're often imagining a lifestyle that doesn't match the reality of what that money can actually do today. Back in the 1960s, $1 million could buy you a house for $12,000 and leave you with enough to live like royalty for decades. That was real wealth, the kind that fundamentally changed your entire existence. But we're not living in that world anymore. Today, $1 million isn't luxury. It's not private jets and mansions and endless champagne. It's a decent buffer against disaster. It's the ability to buy groceries without anxiety, to sleep at night without worrying whether you can afford your medical bills, to maintain basic dignity as you age. This transformation in what $1 million actually means is something most people haven't mentally adjusted to, and that gap between perception and reality creates dangerous miscalculations. They think reaching that number means they've crossed some magical finish line, when in truth, it's closer to the minimum viable safety net for a retirement that doesn't involve compromises and stress. The most dangerous phrase in personal finance might be these 3 words: I'll start later. If you're still operating under that mindset, believing that someday conditions will align perfectly and you'll suddenly become disciplined about building wealth, you need to understand something fundamental. Later is a myth. It's a comfortable story we tell ourselves to avoid the discomfort of changing our behavior. Today, you don't actually have later, you have right now, this moment, this decision point. The people who successfully reach financial independence aren't the ones who waited for perfect conditions to materialize. They're the ones who took imperfect action when circumstances were messy, when life was chaotic, when it felt inconvenient, and they did it year after year after year. Leave action beats perfection in the comments if this is resonating with your own experience. The transformation From financial struggle to security doesn't require genius-level intelligence or extraordinary luck. That's perhaps the most liberating revelation once you truly understand it. The dirty secret that separates those who build wealth from those who don't isn't some mysterious advantage or insider knowledge. It's simply rational, disciplined behavior sustained over decades. That's it. Nothing glamorous, nothing complicated, just consistent, logical decisions repeated so many times they become automatic. And here's why this matters so much. Most people are absolutely allergic to this kind of behavior. They want the shortcut, the hack, the secret strategy that bypasses the boring middle part. They're searching for brilliance when what they actually need is reliability. This is why the vast majority will never see $1 million sitting in their retirement accounts. Not because they're not smart enough, not because they didn't have opportunities, but because they couldn't maintain rational behavior long enough for it to compound into something meaningful. They got distracted, bored, impatient. They convinced themselves that their situation was different, that the rules didn't apply to them, that they'd find another way. Now here's where people get trapped by their own misunderstanding of statistics, and it's a trap that creates false comfort right when you need clarity most. When you hear that Americans have a certain average retirement savings, your brain automatically thinks that represents the typical person. But that's not how averages work in the real world. A few extraordinarily wealthy households at the top drag the average upward dramatically, creating an illusion that makes the overall situation appear far better than it actually is. The median, on the other hand, shows you the true middle. It reveals what the typical household actually has. And when you look at that number, the reality becomes stark. Most Americans are nowhere near financial independence. They're not even in the same neighborhood. This statistical sleight of hand operates behind the scenes, quietly allowing people to believe they're doing better relative to their peers than they actually are. They see headlines about average wealth and think, well, I'm probably around average, so I must be okay. But the median tells a completely different story, one that's far less comforting and far more urgent. And then there's perhaps the most deceptive statistic of all, the one that sounds impressive on the surface, but reveals something troubling when you examine what's actually being measured. You'll hear that 7% of Americans are millionaires, and that sounds like a substantial portion of the population has achieved real wealth. It creates this sense that financial success is relatively common, that plenty of people have figured it out. But here's what that number actually includes: the value of your house, your car, your business assets, your furniture, your collectibles, even your wine collection if you want to stretch the definition. It's measuring everything you own, regardless of whether it produces income or provides any actual financial utility in retirement. When you filter that 7% down to only count people with $1 million in actual retirement savings, liquid assets that can sustain them when work stops, that impressive number shrinks to just 2.6%. The gap between those two figures reveals the enormous difference between appearing wealthy on paper and actually having the resources to fund your later years without compromise or stress. Drop "I see through the numbers now" in the comments if this statistical reality is becoming clearer. This brings us to one of the most persistent illusions in personal finance, and it's an illusion that feels so real that challenging it often makes people defensive. Home equity gets celebrated like it's liquid savings, like it's money sitting in a bank account ready to be deployed whenever you need it. People watch their property value climb year after year and experience genuine pride, a sense of accomplishment, a feeling that they're building wealth. But if your entire financial security depends on eventually selling the roof over your head, what you actually have isn't freedom. It's leverage disguised as stability. Your house doesn't send you monthly checks. It doesn't pay your medical bills. It doesn't cover your grocery expenses or Fund your travel dreams. In fact, it demands constant feeding through maintenance, taxes, and insurance. This mindset creates a dangerous form of wealth that looks impressive on paper, but provides zero practical benefit until you're willing to dismantle your living situation. And that's not a position of strength. That's fragility masquerading as success. The transformation from thinking about home equity as wealth to understanding it as shelter represents one of the most important mental shifts you can make on your journey toward genuine financial independence. Now let's talk about how we collectively arrived at this precarious moment, because understanding the path that led here reveals the hidden patterns that keep repeating across generations. America's retirement crisis wasn't created by one catastrophic event or policy failure. It was built quietly, invisibly, one careless decision at a time, accumulated over decades until the impact became impossible to ignore. Someone skips their retirement contribution during a busy year, telling themselves they'll catch up later. Someone else gets a raise and immediately spends it instead of investing even a portion. Another person faces the choice between a bigger house and a bigger portfolio, and they choose the house every single time because that's what their friends are doing. That's what signals success in their social circle. Behind the scenes, these small decisions compound in the wrong direction. People convince themselves that Social Security will cover their basic needs, so they don't need to be as aggressive with their personal savings. They imagine their future self as some kind of financial superhero who will suddenly develop discipline and wisdom they've never demonstrated before. Each individual choice seems justifiable in the moment, but the cumulative effect over 30 or 40 years creates the crisis we're witnessing today. And there's one force operating throughout this entire journey that deserves special attention because of how reliably it destroys wealth while making people feel like they're winning. Lifestyle inflation might be the most powerful wealth-destroying mechanism on the planet, and it operates with almost perfect efficiency. Here's how it works. The moment someone earns more money, whether through a raise, a promotion, or a bonus, they immediately, almost reflexively, upgrade something in their life. The apartment becomes a house, the modest car becomes a luxury vehicle. The occasional dinner out becomes regular fine dining. The local vacation becomes international travel. Each upgrade feels earned, justified, appropriate for their new income level. But what's actually happening is a transfer of future comfort into present consumption, and most people don't recognize the trade they're making until it's far too late to reverse course easily. Right, lifestyle inflation is real. In the comments if you've experienced this pattern yourself. The timing of when you begin this journey matters far more than most people realize, and the impact of delay compounds in ways that are genuinely shocking once you see the numbers laid bare. You simply cannot build meaningful wealth if your investment timeline is shorter than your mortgage. Think about that for a moment. Someone who starts investing at 25 can essentially coast on the power of compounding. They don't need to be particularly clever or aggressive. Time does the heavy lifting for them. But someone who wakes up at 45 and suddenly realizes they need to get serious about retirement, they need luck. And building your financial future on luck isn't a plan, it's a prayer. This is where the mathematics become brutally honest about the cost of procrastination. Let's say you commit to investing $500 every month at a 7% annual return, which is roughly what the broad stock market has delivered historically. If you maintain that discipline for 35 years, you'll reach approximately $1 million. That timeline works beautifully if you start in your 20s or early 30s. But what happens if you don't start until you're 45? Suddenly you're trying to accomplish in 20 years what should have taken 35. The required monthly contribution doesn't just increase slightly, it more than triples. You'd need to invest over $1,500 every month just to catch up to where you would have been if You'd started earlier. And here's the hidden truth behind those numbers. Most people at 45 simply cannot afford to invest $1,500 monthly. They have mortgages, children heading to college, aging parents who need support, expenses that have accumulated over decades of life decisions. The financial breathing room doesn't exist. So they do what they can, which is often far less than what they need, and the gap between their retirement goals and their retirement reality continues widening year after year. But there's something even more profound happening beneath the surface of these calculations, something that completely transforms how you should think about the role you play in building wealth. When you invest $500 monthly at 7% return over 35 years, you personally contribute $210,000. That's your contribution, the money that came directly from your paychecks, the sacrifices you made, the discipline you maintained. But you end up with $1 million. So where did the other $790,000 come from? That's compounding doing its work behind the scenes. That's your money making money, which then makes more money, creating this exponential growth curve that becomes more powerful with each passing year. In other words, compounding contributes roughly 4 times more wealth than you do through your direct contributions. You do 20% of the work. The market and time do 80%. This revelation should fundamentally change how you view the entire wealth-building journey. You're not trying to manually save your way to $1 million through sheer willpower and sacrifice. You're trying to feed the compounding machine long enough and consistently enough that it can do the heavy lifting for you. Your job isn't to be heroic. It's to be persistent, to keep showing up month after month, year after year, letting mathematics work its slow magic while you focus on living your life. Put "time is my advantage" in the comments if you're understanding the power of starting now rather than later. This distinction between different types of assets becomes absolutely critical when you're trying to understand what actually sustains you in retirement. And it's a distinction that most people miss completely until reality forces the lesson upon them. A house doesn't produce income. A portfolio does. Let that sink in for a moment, because the implications run deeper than they initially appear. Your house sits there looking impressive, demanding constant attention and resources. It needs feeding through maintenance costs. It needs cleaning and upkeep. It requires repairs when things inevitably break down. Insurance premiums arrive like clockwork. Property taxes increase regardless of your ability to pay them. Your house sends you bills month after month, year after year. It never sends you checks. Meanwhile, a properly diversified investment portfolio operates on an entirely different principle. Historically, it doubles roughly every 7 years through the combination of growth and reinvested dividends. It works while you sleep. It compounds while you're focused on other things. It grows during market upswings and recovers during downturns if you maintain the discipline not to panic sell. The transformation from thinking of your home as your primary wealth to understanding your portfolio as your actual financial engine represents a fundamental shift in mindset that separates those who retire comfortably from those who struggle. And here's where this misunderstanding creates what I call the trapped bird syndrome, and once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere. Many people have their entire net worth locked inside their home, like a bird trapped in a cage they built themselves. On paper, they're millionaires. Their property value puts them in that exclusive category. They might even feel proud when they calculate their net worth and see that impressive number. But when a medical emergency arrives, when unexpected expenses appear, when they simply need cash to maintain their standard of living, they discover a disturbing truth. They can't access that wealth without either selling the home they're living in or tapping into a reverse mortgage that slowly transfers ownership to a bank. That's not wealth in any meaningful sense. That's fragility dressed up with a nice lawn and fresh paint. The impact of this realization often hits people in their late 60s or early 70s, right when they should be enjoying the fruits of their lifetime of work. Instead, they're making impossible decisions about whether to downsize, whether to borrow against their home, whether to compromise their living situation just to access the wealth that's theoretically theirs, but practically unavailable. Now let's talk about what $1 million actually provides in today's economy, because this is where expectations collide with mathematical reality in ways that surprise almost everyone. There's this guideline that financial advisors have been using for decades called the 4% rule. The idea is that you can safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio annually without running out of money over a typical retirement span. So if you have $1 million invested, 4% gives you $40,000 per year. Add to that Social Security, which for most people provides between $20,000 and $25,000 annually, and you're looking at a combined income of roughly $60,000 to $65,000. That's not poverty by any measure. But it's also hardly the champagne and caviar lifestyle that people imagine when they dream about being retirement millionaires. Type reality check accepted in the comments if this is painting a clearer picture of what retirement actually looks like financially. In some ways, understanding the typical situation makes the challenge even clearer, and it's a situation that most people don't fully grasp until they're living it themselves. The median retirement savings for Americans between 65 and 74 sits at roughly $200,000. These are people who've already retired or are right at that threshold, and this is what they've managed to accumulate after 4 or 5 decades of working life. When you apply that same 4% withdrawal guideline to $200,000, you get $8,000 per year. That's not a retirement plan. That's barely an allowance. You could literally earn more than that working part-time at a grocery store, which is exactly what millions of retirees find themselves doing, not because they want to stay active and engaged, but because the mathematics of their situation leave them no choice. This is the hidden reality behind all those cheerful images of retirement we see in commercials and advertisements. The beach walks, the golf courses, the relaxed mornings with coffee and newspapers. For most people, retirement looks far less idyllic and far more like careful budgeting, ongoing work, and constant awareness of every expense, because there's simply no cushion, no buffer against the unexpected. And this brings us back to perhaps the most important distinction we can make when thinking about financial security, a distinction that completely reframes what we should be measuring and pursuing on our journey toward independence. Net worth is fundamentally a vanity metric. It's the number you mention at social gatherings to impress friends and relatives. It's what makes you feel successful when you calculate everything you own and see an impressive total. But here's what net worth doesn't do. It doesn't pay your electric bill. It doesn't buy groceries. It doesn't cover your prescription medications. Cash flow does all of those things. Income is what actually determines your day-to-day quality of life. If you retire with $1 million locked inside your home and almost nothing in actual investment accounts, you're not financially independent in any meaningful sense. You're a person with expensive drywall and plumbing who still needs to figure out how to generate the monthly income necessary to sustain yourself. The transformation from measuring net worth to measuring income-generating capacity represents the final evolution in financial thinking, the moment when you stop playing status games and start building actual security, because ultimately, what we're really talking about here isn't asset accumulation, even though that's what most financial advice focuses on. The real goal, the thing that actually determines whether your retirement works or falls apart, is asset conversion. It's the ability to turn what you've built over your working years into sustainable income that flows reliably month after month, year after year, without requiring you to deplete your principal or make desperate decisions. Assets that pay you simply for existing, that generate cash flow while you sleep, that work on your behalf without demanding constant attention, those are the assets that give you genuine freedom. Without income-producing assets working behind the scenes, you don't actually have retirement in the traditional sense. What you have is a countdown, a slowly depleting reserve that creates anxiety rather than peace, stress rather than freedom. Drop "income is freedom" in comments if you're seeing how fundamentally different this approach is from conventional thinking. So here we are at the end of this conversation, and if you've made it this far, you're clearly not someone who settles for surface-level advice or comfortable illusions. You're willing to look at the numbers honestly, to challenge the assumptions you've been carrying, to understand the real difference between appearing successful and actually building security. That kind of mindset is exactly what separates people who drift into retirement hoping things work out from those who arrive prepared, confident, and genuinely free. If this conversation resonated with you, if it shifted something in how you're thinking about your financial future, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. This isn't just another collection of financial tips and motivational quotes. Every video here is built around giving you clarity on the things that actually matter, the distinctions that make real differences in people's lives, the kind of content that helps you make better decisions today so your future self thanks you later. And leave me a comment saying, "This message was meant for me," if you stayed until the end. I genuinely read these comments, and it helps me understand what's landing with you, what topics deserve deeper exploration, what questions you're still wrestling with on your own journey. Hit that like button too, because it helps this message reach other people who need to hear it, who might be making decisions right now based on incomplete information or comfortable myths that won't serve them well in the long run. There's a video right here that digs even deeper into how to actually build income-producing assets, even if you're starting later than you wished you had. Click and continue with me over there, because what we've covered today is just the beginning of understanding how to avoid the trap and do what actually works instead.